Good morning, everybody. I'm Janet Whitaker. Thank you all very much for coming. I think it's the largest attendance I remember for an FFT meeting. I'm co-chair of the all-party parliamentary group for Gypsies, Travel and Roma, and chair of the education department's stakeholders group on their education. So GRT History Month, if I could use the abbreviation, has been a concern for a long time. Friends, families and travellers is to be congratulated on its advocacy for Gypsy, Roma, Traveller History Month, and Emma for organising this event. GRT History Month has been a very important element in the process of getting the culture and heritage of our valued GTR communities properly recognised and appreciated as a part of British heritage. After all, the Gypsy community, at least, has been in this country since the 15th century. GRT History Month also helps erode the still disturbing and harmful prejudice and discrimination against GTR peoples, and it has its place in the recognition of Black and minority ethnic communities in our culture. The Council of Europe, Guardian of Human Rights, has recommended that GRT history should be on the history curriculum and that implementation in schools should be monitored every 5 years. But our government shows no signs of heeding this, although I don't think they're unsympathetic to schools doing their own thing. Some of the better schools already do this, but we need political leadership to make it the norm. Now, there are some experts and committed speakers to come, and I hope start a campaign. It's already started, but renew the campaign to get the government to understand better our cause and act. So I'll conclude here and give my very best wishes for the success of the campaign. I'm afraid I'll have to leave before the end for another commitment, but I look forward now to hearing more from the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Baroness Whitaker. I'd just like to say welcome to everybody this morning. Thank you. Great to see so many people. I'm just going to share my screen, first of all. So if you could just bear with me a moment. Okay, right, hang on. Hang on, sorry, I'm just going to have to escape that a minute. I need to get to the beginning. Hang on. Okay. Oops, sorry, bear with me one moment. Whoops, from the beginning. Right, okay. That's it. Sorry about that little teething trouble. I'm Susanna King, and I work for Friends, Families and Travellers. And I just want to give you a little bit of context. I run an anti-bullying project, which is funded by the Esme Fairbairn project. I just very simply, our outcomes are, hang on.
You're not sharing your screen at the moment.
I'm not sharing my screen. Hang on.
Yeah, I'm just going to do that. Sorry.
Is that shared now? Is that shared? Is it shared now?
No, Susanna.
No, hang on. Okay, I'm just going to click out of that a second. Oh, goodness. Right, okay, so I've done share screen. Hang on, and it's not. Oh, I do apologise for this, everybody. Always some teething troubles at the beginning. Hang on. Okay, hang on. Right. Can you see that now? Or is that still not shared?
No, still not shared, Susanna. Would you?
I don't know what's.
Oh, perfect.
Pardon?
That's got showing you the Zoom screen.
Oh goodness, hang on. Right, I'm going to stop share again. Oh, I'm so sorry about this. Hang on.
But at least we saw your screen. Maybe that's progress.
Oh dear. Hang on. So I've got my PowerPoint open, so I'm not sure why it's not sharing.
If you click share screen, Susanna, one of the options underneath should be your PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, so hang on. Share.
If you click, yeah.
Let's just click out of that again. Okay, so share screen. Okay, it's not coming up with the PowerPoint presentation.
When we saw your screen, click on the open PowerPoint. It should work.
Yeah, but it is open, but it's not coming up on my shared screen, on my share screen. This is a really odd thing.
Susanna, do you want to go ahead and just read from the PowerPoint and then we'll...
Okay, now if I just read from the PowerPoint, will you be able to, can you still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Apologies for this because I had some great slides and stuff. Okay, so just very simply, our outcomes for the project are to challenge bullying and to enable children and young people from the Gypsy Roma Traveller communities to feel safe in schools. Also to enable children and young people from the Gypsy Roma Traveller communities to feel recognised and part of the school community. The final outcome is to increase support and awareness for a more inclusive education for Gypsy Roma Traveller children and young people in school. And really the latter and the one before are the reasons why we're here today. So, so why now? Well, as Baroness Whitaker mentioned, in July last year, the Council of Europe recommended to all its 47 member states for the very first time ever that schools should include Roma and or Traveller history in the teaching curriculum and also in their teaching materials. Now, I think that the Black Lives Matter cause has also added fuel to the debate to overhaul the curriculum and also to reflect the diversity of British society. Gypsies, Roma and Travellers have been part of British society since the 16th century, and yet in no part of the English curriculum we see this. So we've chosen to hold this debate during Holocaust Memorial Week, really to reflect the need to include the Roma and Sinti genocide in all Holocaust teaching. Now, the Holocaust is the only mandatory subject in the history curriculum for Key Stage 3 pupils. So I think it's an opportunity, at least, for us to weave this integral part of the Romani history into school teaching. Now, last year, as part of the work that we're doing, Friends, Families and Travellers undertook a survey, and out of over 2,000 people that were surveyed, 55% of those British people were unaware that over 500,000 Roma and Sinti people were killed in the Holocaust. So, I mean, the only way to rectify this is through education. The Council of Europe report emphasises the importance of teaching the Romani Holocaust to combat hatred, discrimination and prejudice, but they do also stress the need to offer a balanced and contextualised teaching of Roma and Traveller history. So it's really important that we see the positive contributions made by the Gypsy Roma Traveller communities to society and to our economies. Also, the richness and the diversity of the culture. But I think it's really important that we make the link between bullying, educational attainment and invisibility in the school curriculum. I mean, a lot of us know that pupils from Gypsy, Roma Traveller and Irish Traveller backgrounds, which were not included in the White British category in the race disparity audit in 2017, had the lowest attainment and progress, and they were least likely to stay in education after the age of 16. In 2019, Friends, Families and Travellers carried out another survey and found that 86% of pupils reported that their biggest challenge at school was bullying, and this was followed by racism at 73%. Now, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Vardo in a moment, But I know that many organisations here today are working really hard to address some of the issues that I've spoken about, and many of these are going to hear about at the event today. But this is against a tide of government cuts, the dismantling of traveller education, stigmatism in the media, also COVID and the disproportionate impact that this has had. Well, the main project that I run is Crystal's Vardo, and some of you may have already seen the play and aware of the play. And it was written to provide an engaging and positive tool to address bullying in schools of Gypsy, Roma, Traveller children and young people. Also to raise awareness and celebrate the rich histories and the cultures of the Gypsy, Roma, Traveller communities, and to highlight the issues faced by young Gypsy, Roma, Traveller children. But I felt that theatre was a good tool to create something that schools could engage with positively, and also the audience are able to go on a journey, on Crystal's journey of self-discovery. So Crystal is basically a young girl that's been bullied at school, a Romani Gypsy girl, and the audience are taken on a journey with her as she pieces together the shards of her ancestry, and also, so it's a learning process for both, and a coming together, but it's also a story of hope. I think it's really important for people to learn about the persecution of travellers, but also that, as you know, not to be seen as victims, but also the very positive contribution that they make, and the very rich culture. And I had some fantastic photographs of Crystal's Vardo that I really wanted to share with you, but alas, I can't. We've had some fantastic reviews for the play. This is just something that a young girl said, a Romani Traveller girl. I think that Crystal's Vardo is a uniquely presented, rarely seen representation and performance of the Romani history and heritage, and is close as this is possible, and also given from the point of view from a child being bullied. So it really shows what it's like to be that kid. I'm not going to read everything here. We've also had great feedback from schools saying that the play really does sort of help address discrimination and bullying. When asked, 58% of the teachers that we asked said they knew little or nothing about Gypsy, Roma, Traveller histories before seeing the play. 89% said their knowledge had increased after seeing the play, and 86% said that they felt it could address bullying effectively. So positive outcomes have been that young people have commented that it's given them a greater understanding of the issues that their traveller, Gypsy, Roma, Traveller peers face, and also giving more insight into the culture. Teachers have openly said that before seeing the play, they'd not included the Roma and Sinti in the Holocaust teaching, and from there on they would include. And also, one of the really positive things that I've found is the number of Gypsy, Roma, Traveller children finding the confidence after the play to speak up about their heritage. And some teachers have come to us after and said that they'd never actually done this, and for the first time that they've identified. I think it's also really important that and I think the reason why we need to have, well, I think there is an importance to include Gypsy, Roma, Travellers history into the curriculum. It's also for those schools that don't have traveller population, so that, you know, it's taught in the wider community to help combat prejudice generally. So from today, what do we want to achieve? We want to raise the profile of Gypsy, Roma, Traveller histories and culture. We want to emphasise the importance of embedding Gypsy, Roma and Traveller histories across the curriculum. We want to find ways to work together to achieve recognition of Gypsy, Roma and Traveller histories and cultures across the curriculum. Improve access for teaching staff and teaching staff to resources, and also equipping teachers in their training and jobs to increase their understanding and knowledge of the Gypsy, Roma, Traveller communities. So we really need to work together. It's a collective responsibility of government, teaching organisations, local authorities, and organisations and individuals themselves. We are also launching this week a new resources section of our website. I can't share that with you either, And any questions that you have, please just put in the chat. That will be monitored. At the end, there will be a survey monkey, and I would really appreciate it if you could fill that in, because we really want to know, how the event has gone, and anything that can contribute, your contact details, etc. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the morning. Apologies for the technical hiccups, and thank you very much. And right, that leads me on to the next guest, who I would like to introduce, Natalie Staples, who is the Head of Service at Salford Ethnic Minority and Traveller Achievement Service. So Natalie, over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Could everyone put themselves on mute who's not?
Yeah, there's a slight echo, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, as Susanna said, I'm Natalie Staples, and I'm Head of the Service at Salford Ethnic Minority and Traveller Achievement Service. And I'm also Chair of the Northern Gypsy Roma Traveller Coordinators Group, which represents 12 travel education services across the north of England. And I'll be speaking today from the perspective of travel education services. Travel education services have over a 30-year history of working in schools and with Gypsy traveller and then later on Roma children. And I've seen firsthand both good and bad practice in terms of education inclusion in schools. There is no doubt that there are some schools and head teachers who are working really hard to improve education inclusion for all their pupils and are keen to implement specific strategies and initiatives through the curriculum to reflect the experiences and histories of different communities, whether these pupils are part of their school demographic or not. These schools need to be recognised for the commitment they show and the good work they are doing. Unfortunately, and I think most travel education specialists would agree, such schools are in the minority, especially when it comes to raising awareness of the history and heritage of Gypsy, Roma and Traveller children, even when schools have children from these ethnicities on roll. It is an all too frequent occurrence that staff have absolutely no idea about Gypsy, Roma and Traveller culture and heritage, apart from what they may have learned from damaging TV programmes such as My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding. More worryingly, some schools show no interest or desire to improve their knowledge and mistake equality or inclusion for treating everyone the same. So where does this leave the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller child in the classroom? Isolated, unable to be open about who they are, forced to hide their identity and heritage out of fear of ridicule and misunderstanding. These experiences reinforce the negative societal narrative that the majority of Gypsy, Roma and Traveller children grow up with, in a place where they should feel totally safe and accepted in every way. It is well documented in many research studies that ethnic minority children need to see themselves reflected in the curriculum in a sensitive and an appropriate way. They need to see themselves as being part of the whole rather than an add-on. And that is why introducing a more inclusive curriculum needs to be carefully thought through and well planned strategically and operationally. Tokenistic attempts to include a more diverse curriculum can sometimes cause more harm than good and result in the reinforcing of stereotypes rather than challenging them. One of the legacies of travel education services is the wealth of educational resources which were developed, often in partnership with local Gypsy, Roma and Traveller communities. These resources cover a wide range of curriculum areas, age and ability range, and when used well, they were and still are excellent resources. Some of the resources are a little outdated now, but not all of them by any means. And some travel education services that still do exist still have these resources. Where services ceased to exist, the resources were often donated to local schools or NGOs. Myself and many of my travel education colleagues over the years have helped to deliver and witness some great Gypsy Roma travel inclusive lessons and projects, which have had a great impact on all the children in the classroom and notably the staff, which is significant. In particular, seeing the change in body language of the Gypsy Roma Traveller children, standing proud, eyes lit up, interested, enthused, passionate, eager to answer questions and show their knowledge, a rare opportunity to shine. Surely this is what education is all about. I remember one staff member saying that they had never seen their traveller pupil like that before. It was almost like a different child. A couple of projects spring to mind: Friends, Families and Travellers, Crystal's Vardo's Travel in Play is noteworthy, and our own Young Roots Heritage Lottery Irish Traveller Wagon project in Salford, which was awarded the Council of Europe's Doster Prize for Gypsy Roma Travel Education inclusion last year. It is hard for existing travel education services to maintain the development of high quality resources, and they often have to look for external funding bids to do this. Teams that do exist are much smaller, sometimes just one person covering vast areas with high Gypsy, Traveller and Roma populations. The immediate needs of the children have to come first in these situations, such as accessing a school place and retaining that place when travelling and accessing basic services. Although the NGOs and charities are also stretched and struggling to survive at times, they have produced some excellent resources too. Organisations include the Romani Cultural Arts Association, Romani Theatre Company, Traveller Times, Traveller Movement, Roma Support, who've recently created their excellent Roma Oral History project. A question I have is though, are these organisations and the remaining travel education services working smart enough? Are we working together to help make schools more aware of these resources and their potential impact? Could we promote them better? Also, when resources are on mainstream education platforms such as Twinkle, which has a growing number of good Gypsy Roma travel resources, and sites such as the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust and the Historical Association, are we getting the word out to class teachers and schools? There are so many curriculum areas within both the primary and secondary sector that can include elements of inclusive education, such as history, geography, art, music, English, and of course, PSHE and citizenship. The opportunities are countless. Over and above this, there are statutory government directives such as the British Values Agenda, which can be used effectively to improve inclusive education for all groups of children. Other excellent initiatives such as UNICEF Rights Respecting Schools Award, Schools of Sanctuary, and No Outsiders can give momentum and help create a very inclusive ethos throughout the school. One of the challenges of the current situation is persuading schools to prioritise this important work when they are already extremely overstretched on many fronts, with conflicting demands and often reduced budgets. The reason why we are here today is because of the Council of Europe recommendation for Roma and Traveller history to be included in the curriculum. And although there is no compulsion on behalf of the DFE to enforce this, and they are unlikely to do so in my opinion, such recommendations can help raise awareness of why this is necessary in the UK, as well as across other EU member states. We need to persuade and support schools to take up these initiatives, and in my experience, once a school is on board, they see the benefits to all their pupils and continue to engage. Another important issue to raise is the ability of mainstream teachers to deliver content on Gypsy Roma Traveller history and culture confidently and effectively. Resources alone are not enough. I have personally delivered many lessons on Gypsy Roma Traveller themes to primary and secondary pupils, and quite frankly, you have to know what you are doing. Schools reflect society, and if society accepts hate crime against Gypsy Roma Traveller communities, which unfortunately it does too frequently, then children in classrooms will be emboldened to challenge and make derogatory comments and question the lesson content. Teachers need to be supported and well trained when delivering lessons on Gypsy Roma Traveller history and culture, so they feel confident about what they are saying and are delivering the lesson with authenticity and not tokenism. History teachers are probably one of the most skilled group of teachers in delivering sensitive curriculum content, for example, the Holocaust, but they would still require training to improve their knowledge base. This brings the issue of initial teacher training and CPD opportunities, which includes Gypsy Roma Traveller awareness. How much of this is taking place? What can we do to improve the situation? And what happens when the willing, enthusiastic teacher leaves? Are systems in place which will embed and grow best practice? One of the best ways of training teachers is by inviting local community members into school to deliver sessions, excuse me, as they often have the most knowledge and lived experience. However, this isn't without challenge and needs to be set up appropriately for both the community member and the school to feel satisfied with the outcome. Support is needed for the community member to ensure that they can understand the brief and the expectations and objectives of the session. Staff and schools also need to appreciate the opportunity and understand that coming into an educational establishment might not be the easiest thing for a community member, particularly if they have had prior negative experiences themselves of schooling. Another issue which can be also overlooked is the need to either pay the community member or at least reimburse travel expenses. Schools usually pay for training, so it should be no different for community members. So how do we move forward? It's great that we have so many people attending today who are interested in this subject and understand the importance of it. The current position of the DfE means that schools and teachers have a certain amount of flexibility about how they deliver the curriculum, which includes the history curriculum. Although we may wish it was different, and whilst we can keep on advocating for change to support the reinstatement of the Gypsy Roma Traveller History Month, to make certain things compulsory, such as the teaching of the Roma and Sinti Holocaust, we have to keep influencing, persuading, networking, and where possible, producing high quality resources which are relevant and current for the children of today. It's fair to say that promoting Gypsy Roma travel education in the curriculum is challenging, with local authorities having a diminished role, the demise of travel education services, reduced budgets, and not to mention COVID. But ultimately, I'm a realist and we have to work within the current context and do what we can. So myself and many of my passionate colleagues who want to make a difference to the lives of Gypsy Roma traveller children will keep promoting, persuading, networking, advocating, supporting, and working with the Gypsy Roma traveller communities. And I think above all, we need to listen. We need to listen to the voices of the Gypsy Roma traveller children we know and work with every day, because it's their experiences in schools and what they have to say about that which will ultimately make the biggest impact on positive change. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you, Natalie. That was absolutely great, and you made some really fantastic and very valid points there. I think working together is just so important, because there's an awful lot of work going on out there, and I think that's reflected in the numbers that are attending here today. And I think it is, we really do need to establish a really good network so that we can all work together. And also, I think, again, what you said about travel with training as well, it's not enough for just teachers to be able to go on a website. They do need to have that, that they need to have that kind of background and that support. So I think, maybe teacher training is kind of would be a really good place to start with that. But anyway, thank you, Natalie. And we're going to move on to our next speaker. And I would like to introduce you to Oliver Petrovich, who is going to speak about his experiences as a young person. So, Oliver, good morning.
Good morning. My name is Oliver, and I'm a 16-year-old Roma A-level student. In my 10+ years in education, I feel as if my education experience has been made more difficult for me because of the fact I'm Roma. And I always felt as though, as Roma people, we have always been one step behind and never truly included. For example, I remember in primary school, entering school and seeing so many amazing and beautiful displays with cultures and flags, and not once seeing a Roma flag, which of course made me feel left out from a young age. And I feel as if though this subconsciously affected me throughout my school experience. For example, when I began to get older, such as 11, 12, and was going from primary to secondary, as a Roma person, I didn't have a tick box when applying for secondary schools. I just used to tick other. And this also made me feel left out before I had even started, which of course will make us as Roma people feel bad, as we aren't even classified on paper, but it also affects schools, as they don't know how many Roma people they have in their school, and therefore don't know how to help certain students. They also don't know why certain kids act a certain way. For example, as a Roma in school, I always looked for a sense of belonging, as I never had one anywhere. And sometimes I look for this in the wrong places. But my school would never be able to ask the question why. as they didn't even know I was Roma. I was just other to them. And this is why I believe these small things are so important for schools to have, as it allows kids to avoid certain feelings, but also allows schools to learn to deal and prevent certain situations that can come from these feelings. Another thing I believe is important for schools to include is Roma people in the curriculum, as our history plays such a major role in the world, not just to us, but to everyone, and is never spoken about. For example, in the Holocaust, where Roma people were part of the same genocide as the Jewish, our story is never taught. And as a Roma person whose family was killed in that place, it makes me feel as though my family died for nothing. But I know how much of an effect can be made if it is included. As the one time a teacher briefly brought up Roma people in World War II, I remember being so excited. I even called my mum after the lesson telling her. And I feel as though teaching about Roma history is good for Roma kids to start talking, as I know I wanted to share my history when a teacher brought it up for once. And I feel it would be a good icebreaker for some people to say they're Roma, as we often hide it. Furthermore, I believe discrimination towards Roma people was usually pushed to the side by teachers and students, as they themselves aren't trained and taught about Roma/Travelers, and how words such as Haiki, Jippo are very offensive. I believe teachers and students are often very unaware how bad Roma and Travelers are stereotyped, for example, as thieves, scammers, etc., and how much these stereotypes leave us to hide our identity due to being afraid that in a classroom, people will point fingers at me if a phone or money or even a glue stick goes missing. But just by adding Roma history to the curriculum and giving teachers in-depth training about Roma kids and other ethnic minorities, I believe a lot of awkward encounters could be avoided, as students and teachers will be a lot less naive about us, and it will just allow kids to come out and feel as though they can say they're Roma, which will also help other students understand not all Roma and Travelers are bad, as their classmate who's a great student or friend may be a Roma or Traveller, and they'll actually know how many good Roma and Travelers they've met, not just believe we are all as bad as the ones they've seen and heard about on TV. However, I must say I was lucky. I was British born and my mother was a very good English speaker, so communication wasn't an issue for us. However, with a lot of Roma people, we aren't used to education and systems, therefore making parents look bad when in reality they just don't know certain things, such as having to communicate when a child is late or marking your child as absent, calling the school, as this isn't normal for a lot of Roma people as it is for another student whose family have been fortunate enough to have an education before them and know the system. This is why I also believe Roma parents should have support with learning the system and get supported by the system with small things such as interpreters and parents' evenings, and help learning about education policies and how important they are when they don't follow them. That's just a few of the things that I believe are important and a few of my experiences, and just some ways I believe we can try and move forward.
Thank you, Ollie. That was brilliant. Thank you. It was very heartfelt, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, really, with just that feeling of being included and how important it is to have that representation across the curriculum, and also talking about your very positive experience of when you heard your teachers speaking and actually recognizing that and how that made you feel, and how that will impact on your well-being and your whole sense of being part of the school community. So thank you, Ollie. Can I just, so I can hear some feedback, but I just wanted to ask Emma if there are any questions for the panelists so far that you'd like to share. Emma?
I'm just monitoring the chat, and I think the questions have more been practical ones, like about the play and about. I don't think there's any actual, and lots of compliments to all the speakers. You've got lots of compliments, Ollie. I don't think there's any specific questions as yet, but I'll keep monitoring the chat, and if there's any questions, if people want to pop them in, and we'll we'll have question breaks, potential question breaks throughout the event and at the end. So plenty of time still.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I'd like to introduce you to our next speaker now, who is Lifty McDonald-Bond, and had great pleasure in working with Lifty on the anti-bullying tool for the All Together programme. So over to you, Lifty.
Thanks, Susanna. So I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. Can you all see that okay and hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So just close this. So yes, as Susanna said, I'm Lifty McDonald-Bond, Project Officer at the Anti-Bullying Alliance, which is part of the National Children's Bureau. Just move on. So just to give you an overview of the way we work, don't worry, I won't go into all of this, but there's sort of three main pillars to our work, which is campaign work, practice improvement. So we do a lot of work with schools and local authorities, and we also do policy and advocacy work as well. And then through all of that work, we ensure that the voice of young people is heard. So we kind of consult with young people along the way. And we're a membership group, so we're a coalition of individuals and organisations. And so we work with our members on various pieces of work, and actually working with friends, families and travellers, and the traveller movement has kind of come out of working with our members really. And research and evidence, so everything we do is kind of based on research and evidence, and we also kind of generate our own data and research as well and publish that. And then we just ensure that we continuously listen to what our members and others in the sector are saying to us, and then we kind of share what we're hearing as well. So it's a very sort of collaborative approach. And ultimately our mission is to reduce bullying of all children and young people and improve responses to bullying by bringing the sectors together. So today I'm here just to talk to you about a bit more about the project that Susanna mentioned that we're working in collaboration with friends, families and travellers on. So essentially it's a project aimed at tackling bullying of Gypsy, Roma and Traveller peoples, and it's part of a wider programme that Friends, Families and Travellers lead on, which is funded by the Esme Fairbairn Foundation. So ultimately, the aim of the project is to challenge bullying of GRT children and young people, ensure that they feel safer in schools, and ensure that they have cultural affirmation in schools. So this is just a little bit of background information. I'm sure many of you will be very familiar with some of this data and research which is already out there, but just to say that bullying is often cited as one of the main reasons young people from GRT communities leave school early or do not continue into secondary education. So it's a real barrier to education. And actually we did a recent literature review just towards the end of last year, and I'm very happy to send around the links for that as well because it's quite interesting, that it found that Gypsy, Roma and Traveller children are significantly more likely to experience bullying. So really it just kind of confirmed and echoed what our members were telling us, what we're hearing on the ground, and other reports and research that was out there. So the project activities, the kind of first thing that we did really was we held some focus groups with Gypsy, Roma and Traveller young people, and that kind of informed everything that we did afterwards, which is to essentially create a school audit and action planning tool and an anti-bullying guide for schools as well. And then along the way, we work with friends, families and travellers who kind of provide advice and consult with us on the tools and resources that we're producing. So just to tell you a bit more about the focus groups, there were 3 focus groups over 2 locations, so London and Sussex. It was kind of the whole range of ages from 5 to 18 and mixed sex groups. And it included children and young people from English, Gypsy, European Roma and Irish traveller communities as well. And this was in collaboration with the Traveller Movement, the Roma Support Group and Staining School in Sussex as well. So the findings from the focus group, there's quite a lot of similar things that Ollie just mentioned as well, really, which are kind of lack of understanding, visibility of GRT histories and cultures in school, being negatively labelled, judged, having presumptions made about them, being troublemakers, before people even got to know them. They felt they were treated differently from other pupils and could not access additional support when they needed it. That was particularly around when English was an additional language rather than first language as well. They mentioned a lot around racist and offensive language being used and not being challenged, and school staff not really understanding how offensive they are. Also, when they were reporting bullying, they were not being believed because of the sort of presumptions being made about them being the troublemakers or being the bullies. It wasn't being taken seriously. And then a lot of the time they sort of felt that they had to retaliate because nothing was being done about it, or hide the fact that they were Gypsy, Roma and Traveller. So I think that quote down there just kind of sums up really how they feel that they're just completely invisible in school, and that they'd kind of learned to expect bullying because no action was being taken to prevent or to respond to it. So although their experiences in school were really negative, and the full report is not an easy read, I have to say, they had some really positive ideas and recommendations really as to how these issues can be challenged. So some of them are to raise awareness and celebrate Gypsy, Roma, Traveller history and culture across the curriculum and in the school environment, as well as Gypsy, Roma, Traveller History Month, challenge racist and offensive language, ensure that there's better responses to bullying so that GRT children and young people will be believed and action taken, more support from teaching staff so that they understand GRT culture and the issues faced. More positive and visible GRT role models was a really big thing for the children and young people we spoke to, and recognition that there are many diverse communities with different histories and cultures under the GRT banner. They also had some really good ideas, sort of practical ideas really, about how it could be included in sort of everyday school life. So this included learning about traditional foods and dishes in home economics, history classes, learning about racism towards GRT people in PSHE, and in art classes and exploring the rich cultural and artistic history of GRT communities. And they felt very strongly that teaching should be developed and delivered with GRT young people and communities. So they very much felt like it should be something done in collaboration with them and not just being done to them. So this is the name of the report. If you are interested in reading the full report, there's loads in there. And so we published that just at the beginning of term last year. What we're planning to do is kind of get lots of feedback, and so we're sort of piloting these materials at the moment, and then we'll kind of turn this into something a bit more kind of practical for schools. But this kind of includes all of the quotes and the information that the young people told us from the focus groups, if you're interested in reading the full report. We also developed a Gypsy, Roma, Traveller school anti-bullying audit and action planning tool. So this is just a kind of snip of the sort of homepage of the tool, but it goes through thematic areas that we know from a sort of whole school approach what works. And then what we've done is we've developed indicators based on what the children and young people told us, and schools can kind of audit how they're doing things at the moment, and then choose to add it to their action plan, and then kind of work on those areas over a period of time, and then kind of look back over what they've done and see what kind of progress has been made. So this is a really kind of practical tool that we're piloting at the moment. So again, if you'd like to take a look at it, and if you have any feedback about ways we could improve this as well, make it even better, I'd be very happy to hear from you. And just to add as well that we have built these tools into our kind of wider whole school anti-bullying program, which is called Altogether. So we've added in additional details about groups that are more at risk, which includes the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller materials, also links to Crystal's Vardo materials, and lots of other materials as well to kind of support schools to do this work. They can kind of add it to their action plan. And another key thing that we've added into the Altogether programme just in the last year is that there's a pupil wellbeing questionnaire as part of the programme. And so this is where we sort of hear directly from children and young people. And for the first time, we're collecting ethnicity data. So by the end of the programme finishes end of March, we should have some really good data on which groups are kind of experiencing bullying more than others. So that will be really interesting, and obviously we'll share those details once we have all that data back in and analysed. And so the link is just down there, I think that's it. So that's the link to all of the tools and resources. And also, if you've got any useful tools and resources that we can add to the Altogether Hub and to our website, and please do share them, and we can kind of link those to schools as well. And yeah, happy to take any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lifty. That was great. It's such an important tool, this, and I think it it should be shared among all schools. And yeah, and I think as I said before, is kind of making that link between bullying and the representation of travellers, because while we were doing the focus groups, time and again the young people kept speaking about the fact that they just felt invisible, and I think that to sort of address that would just really could tackle many other issues linked to Gypsy, Roma, Traveller young people in schools. Okay, right, well, we'll go to our next panelist, who is Marco Petsock. So Marco, I'd like to welcome you to the event this morning. And
thank you, Susanna. Hi, everyone. My name is Marco Petsock. I am the research officer at Roma Education Fund. First, it's a great pleasure to be here and to speak to so many people, the 200 plus people here, and provide some information and some evidence related to some of the data and research that I've been a part of. So to get into it, Roma Education Fund, in partnership with the George Eckert Institution and also Council of Europe, conducted a research project over the past couple years that looked at the school curriculum, national curriculum for 22 countries, and then also textbooks within 20 countries. This was about a 2.5-year project from start to finish in terms of starting the project and then completing the reports. And I'm sure the administrators here will share the report in the messages below. So I just want to give you a little bit of background in terms of the goals and the methodology. And I think there's two important things to mention here. One is the methodology, the sample. So we went first for state-approved textbooks in those countries that have state-approved textbooks. Of course, in the UK, there isn't state-approved textbooks, so how we went about to to gather the sample of textbooks was by going to the most used publishing houses and textbooks. And one caveat in terms of the sample in the UK, because limited resources, we were only able to look at England and not the entirety of the UK. So we looked at the most popular and the most common used textbooks and publishing houses in the UK, wanted to get a sort of representative sample. The second, I think, important thing here is that myself being Roma, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just myself and the researchers looking at the textbooks and the curriculum and evaluating them. And so we incorporated kind of a participatory action methodology where we included Roma individuals into the research process so that they are looking at the material, they're conducting the analysis, they're giving the feedback, creating the recommendations throughout the whole process. And this was a very crucial part of the whole design, and they were very instrumental in every single aspect of the research. So to give you a little bit of background, here is a table looking at what we found in terms of the national curricula. So you can see that most of the countries that did mention Roma or Gypsy, Roma Traveller, or any other sort of term that is associated within the country, most of it was in the history textbooks, in the history curricula. There were some in civics, as you can see, Germany, Hungary, and then Spain was kind of a cross country. And then you can see on the right-hand side a little bit of a more detailed breakdown. We didn't only look at Roma or other terms, we also looked at national minorities and where national minorities and or Roma were included in the national curricula. Predominantly it was in Germany. And throughout the whole research process, we saw that the German example in terms of the curriculum and in terms of the textbooks was one of the kind of highlights and better examples. So how does that lead to mentions in the textbooks, the national curriculum? One thing to make really important and to highlight is that we found a really strong relationship between if there was a mention of Roma in the curriculum with the mentions in the textbooks. So it's not just any sort of kind of loose thing, like it will, teachers and publishing houses will include Roma history, culture, and representation in textbooks and in the classroom if the curriculum doesn't mention it. We saw a kind of a clear relationship that it is the case that if it is mentioned in the national curriculum, it is also included in the classroom and in the textbooks. So here what you can see a little bit is also the proportion of Roma in the country compared to the number of mentions we found in the textbooks. And what we found was quite the opposite, what you would expect, that those countries with the higher proportion of Roma would have higher mentions of Roma in their textbooks. We did not find that. We actually found the opposite relationship. And one thing to mention here is those countries that had a high population of Roma, the only time we really saw a mention of Roma was in demographics, kind of mentioning the different national ethnicities or nationalities within the country. So here's the major themes that we looked at within the research project, and this was very influenced by the researchers themselves who were from Roma ethnicity, because we didn't go and just saying what did we see, we said what do we want to see, what are the things that we want to see in the textbooks. And here's a little bit of the themes that we developed. So Roma positions and challenges in history. This is a lot where the Roma Holocaust or other kind of past injustices were categorized. Then Roma as a demographic minority, Roma culture, and then Roma in contemporary society. I won't list all the sub-themes, but we went in great detail. In this slide, what you can see is a little bit of a sample. We looked over 850 textbooks. Around 35% mentioned Roma. There were over 900 mentions of Roma, but one thing to notice is that the average mention of Roma per textbook was close to 1. And then in the pie charts, you can see which countries, how did they represent Roma in which themes. And you can see in terms of the United Kingdom, which is actually only England, most of it was Roma contemporary society, followed by Roma and European history. And we'll get a little bit of detail in terms of that. So why was this research important? So textbooks and national curricula reaches the masses. It is also an expression of the national identity and the national values, and it influences students' attitudes towards groups within that society. So it can either create a divide between us and them, or it can create values of humanity, morality, social justice, and equality. But the main thing I think to really come out of this is that they really truly represent the society's values and society in general. So to go a little bit into the findings, we found a limited range of topics, mostly mentioned a single demographic unit. So in one sentence, it was something like, in Romania, predominantly 80% are Romanian ethnicity, and then followed by different categorizations of the other ethnicities. So it could be Turkish, Roma, and so on. We did not find really any representation of Roma's role in these societies, especially with history and culture. When it was mentioned, there was a lot of misrepresentation. So there was, and I'll go into the photos here. So here are some photos. The top are from Albania, and these are photos mentioning child rights in Albanian textbooks. And when you look at this, you see some of the typical narratives and stereotypes that you hear in Albania, but also across Europe, that Roma beggars, unclean, and so on, right? And also that parents don't take care of their children. So all these types of stereotypes and these images, and also incorporating it into the textbooks, creates a strong associations with the dominant society stereotypes and matching those within the textbooks. And this is what students learn. In the bottom right-hand corner is actually a Croatian textbook, put in a photo in an exercise asking students, what do you think the social class is of this Roma family? And again, it brings up the stereotypes, kind of old traditions of horse and carriage, and associates, is even leading students to associating this type of image of a culture with class and income. So these are just some of how the misrepresentations are presented in the images. And then one bottom left was in Romania, and it was talking about culture in Romania, Roma culture. And again, the Romanian colleagues did not see this as at all like a cultural representation or a cultural image, and again, kind of created different types of stereotypes and reactions and emotions to readers and viewers. We didn't see much of a recognizing, again, some contribution. We didn't see Roma voices. We didn't see much challenging of prejudice, except in the German textbooks, and also one thing in English textbooks. We did see a few textbooks in particular that we evaluated that did challenge discrimination and prejudice quite well. I will skip this just because of time, and I will show you the example within England. So here's a textbook in England, and this is Watts Duncan 2009 AQA Citizenship. So this is for students who are in secondary school, and to give you a brief kind of outline how this chapter went about, it was giving lessons on persecution, prejudice, and discrimination. And throughout they used Roma, and again, this isn't UK or English communities, they were using European Roma, especially from the Holocaust, as a case example of how prejudice can lead to persecution and violence. And you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, they gave dates and also information of all the past injustices. And they gave in terms of different examples from the UK, but also examples from Eastern Europe and Italy. And then in the next page, you can see they give some images and some text giving the reader some material of how prejudice can lead to discrimination and so on, and what is the difference between these. Again, using case examples of Roma, but also other ethnicities and groups. Okay, just briefly, because I'm running a little bit short on time, is the researchers and I who conducted this report with the Council of Europe also went into a little bit more depth regarding the Romani Holocaust representation. We went through all the textbooks, looking specifically and critically into the representations of the Romani Holocaust in the textbooks, and we found that overall it reproduces Romani exclusion and anti-Gypsyism. Textbooks portray an authority of knowledge and presenting narratives as truths and facts. And if this is the case, then this is really important in order to make sure that the narratives represent the social values and ideas that we want to have related to, fighting prejudices and so on. We also found that there was a lack of importance of the Romani Holocaust specifically. Most of the mentions of Roma were kind of an annex in one sentence, saying the victims were Jewish, also Roma, not only, as well as. So this type of language kind of associates saying that Roma Holocaust and the Roma experience is not is not important, doesn't have a significance in the material, but is kind of an annex. We also didn't see mentions that were exclusively just about the Romani experience. So we also didn't see mentions that assigned kind of Roma genocide, Roma Holocaust, or using the terms Porajmos or Samudaripen. We saw it very sporadically, I think only in a handful of textbooks. Overwhelming, it's a perspective from the perpetrators. This is also found in a lot of Jewish representation in the Holocaust as well. There's a lot of lack of agency in terms of Roma, so it's always they were killed, they were deported, they were slaughtered, but we don't see much of the resistance, we don't see much of the actions, we don't see much of the experiences of the Roma themselves. Textbooks also kind of fail to directly identify the perpetrators. They kind of left it in terms of Nazis or the Germans, and especially if it wasn't in German textbooks, they quickly were associated this group and not individual people or themselves, even if, like, for instance, Romania or Hungary did have a lot of complacency in the Holocaust. There wasn't strong refutation and condemning. Most of the time it was just in air quotes saying the justifications of the perpetrators of why they committed these atrocities. And the air quotes were implied, or sorry, the quotation marks were implied that these are wrong actions, but they weren't really strongly condemning these actions. And again, quickly, there was an absence of human rights narratives or sort of empathetic connections that can create a connection between the reader and the experiences of Romani individuals during the Holocaust. Just to sum up, I think it's really important here in terms of the UK, system, that there is a gap between what the national curriculum has included, what is in the textbooks. As you can see, some publishing houses have good, not great, representation of Roma and Gypsy Roma travelers and the Holocaust. But there is a missing gap, and this gap really is related to kind of the priority of the UK and priority of the English Ministry of Education and other officials who have some power in terms of this, because as this quote says, the curriculum really reflects and reproduces a societal curriculum, especially in terms of invisibility and marginalization in groups. And if it's not included in the national curriculum, it leads again to this invisibility of Gypsy Roma travelers in the UK. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Marco. That's really interesting and fascinating also to make those comparisons. I'm going to have to move along quite quickly now. We've got a couple of questions actually for Ollie. So Ollie, are you still there? Are you still with us, Ollie?
Yeah.
Emma, you.
Hello?
Emma.
There's 3 questions for you on the chat, Ollie. So I'll read them all out and then you can answer them all at once. So we've got from David Summers, do you think that education in schools about people who are Roma and what they've achieved and contributed to society would help school children to understand and appreciate Roma classmates better? And then we've got one from Chris Derbyshire, Ollie, what are your ambitions, please? And one from Kate Bellinger, what would Ollie like included? Is there a specific person, for example, for history or art?
Well, I'll start from the beginning. I believe that if schools did talk about some of the positive things that Roma people have done, I definitely think that people would start to warm up to the Roma people a lot more, because they'll realize how much of our culture has been put in so many different countries without them realizing. For example, in the last question you asked, like, would you like us to involve art? One thing that Roma people or the Roma community and like Roma people and the Roma community have done is they've put so much things into culture. For example, within Spanish flamenco and certain instruments and a lot of music, a lot of our culture is put into music, and people don't know that it comes from us or it stems from our culture. And I feel like if in music lessons, for example, music teachers were to talk about how Roma people influenced certain music or certain dances, I definitely think that students will kind of look at it and say, oh wow, like I never knew Roma people done that, or this stems from the Roma community. And I think that it will kind of give like a good impression of us, and just something that people say, oh wow, that's quite cool, and they'll see some positive things that we've done and that we've implemented without people even knowing, for example. If that answers your question, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Ollie.
I also just saw that someone said, I remember telling my teacher in class that Zinedine Zidane was Roma. Most of the boys who are football fans completely changed their attitude. And it's so true. Like, I remember finding out so many footballers, like Zlatan Ibrahimovic was a Roma, Eric Cantona had Roma in him. Like, there's so many footballers and so many other people, like actors or singers that are Roma, and we don't even know about them. And it's people that we look up to on an everyday basis, that some of them are your idols, that people idolize these people and you don't know about it. And it's like, of course, like I believe it was Martin just said, like, your whole attitude will change, because like, wow, this is my favorite footballer, this is my favorite singer. It's like, of course, it would definitely make people's eyes open and just see people in different ways.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those positive role models are essential, aren't they? Okay, Emma, is that the last of the questions for now?
If you wanted to answer the personal ambitions one, but if you don't, fair enough.
Oh no, I don't know. That's a mad question. That's got me thinking. I guess that right now my ambition is just to change the way that people see us and see Roma people and Gypsy, Roma, Traveller people, and just I want them to just kind of acknowledge us more and see us in a positive way. And I just want like the people that, like when I was in school, all the negative stereotypes and like all the stereotypes I've heard people call me or call my friends that have made me really like heat up and get angry. Like, I don't want that for other people. I just want people to acknowledge us and kind of embrace us and just understand that what they're doing is wrong, and that we're all like, we're good people and we have good things to say and we've done good things.
Thank you, Ollie. That's fantastic. I'm going to move on now and introduce you to Lisa Smith, who's the chair of the Advisory Council for the Education of Romani and Travellers. And Lisa's going to talk about the importance of the Romani Holocaust and Dickenna Vista, I believe. Okay. Morning, Lisa.
Morning, Suzanne. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Well, first of all, I want to say a thank you for inviting me to take part in this, what I feel is a really important discussion. So thanks. So first and foremost, I'd like to say that ASA as an organisation wholeheartedly supports the Council of Europe's recommendations to include education about Roma and Travellers on the curriculum. And we really agree it will be an effective tool to combat hatred, discrimination and prejudice, and believe including it on the school curriculum would improve wider society's knowledge of the contributions that we have made to British society. And we feel as though it needs to really be viewed as a matter of social justice. It's time that we're acknowledged and represented. And we feel it's the responsibility of the Department for Education to make this a priority, to ensure that it can be filtered down, to ensure that every child in the English education system has the opportunity to feel valued, seen and heard. And the silence of Romani and Traveller history can have long-standing and damaging consequences on young Roma and Travellers' self-esteem and how they view themselves and the world around them. And this silence only acts to perpetuate stereotypes in wider society. And I say this from my own lived experience as a Romani woman. For the event though, I've actually been asked to talk about briefly Dicina Bista, the Look and Don't Forget event, which is an international Romani Holocaust youth commemoration event that takes place every year. I remember standing in Auschwitz concentration camp for the Dicina Bista event in 2016 and really getting chills as I read a quote that said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And this was a quote by a Spanish-American philosopher and writer, George Sanyatan. We all know that yesterday was the 27th of January, a remembrance day for Germany and most of the world for the 6 million European Jews killed, the Sinti and Roma, and many others who faced an extermination campaign led by the National Socialist regime. Across the world at the moment, we've seen people sharing their experiences of facing the COVID-19 pandemic and the health, social and economic threats that it's brought with it. However, over the last year, we've also seen it be used as a license to unleash racism against stigmatized groups. This could be seen at the national borders as countries hurry to separate them from us, and also within countries where there's been an escalation of populist and racist voices intent on blaming particular groups for the pandemic. Awareness around the commemoration and remembrance feels even more potent today than maybe ever. We've seen in Europe, just as in some other parts of the world, governments bid to contain the spread of COVID-19. And it's brought right-wing extremists to the forefront of anti-lockdown protests. We've seen extremists attend rallies and leverage the pandemic to spread racist conspiracy theories. Many of these theories, for example, have attributed Jews as the source of the crisis. That the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, a body which fights against anti-Semitism, has also reported that this pandemic has flamed the fires of anti-Roma racism across Europe, with Roma and Travellers being blamed as intentional spreaders of the virus. The UK have not been exempt from this, and at a time when Roma and Travellers, because of the already stark health inequalities, are being disproportionately impacted by the virus, we've seen a push through of the new police and crime bill, which according to reports by the Daily Telegraph will give unnecessary powers to the police. And we're at a time when many community members are fearful and concerned it could potentially wipe out an ancient way of life, and also at this time make thousands of Romani Gypsies and Travellers homeless. We've seen the continuation of evictions across the country and politicians publicly linking these groups to inherent criminality, and a range of media outlets broadcasting similar narratives blaming Roma and Travellers for spreading COVID-19. That's led to outbursts of racist hate speech, countless anti-Romani dehumanizing and deeply offensive fake posts and news on Facebook that still remain unaddressed to this day. Now more than ever, it's essential that our general history and education about the Romani Holocaust is on the school curriculum, giving an opportunity for young people to learn about the persecution and extermination campaign against Europe's Romani population, which unfortunately is still largely unknown, and general education to create a more equal and just society. In the current climate, we really do need some political leadership on this issue, where the relevance and significance of our long-standing histories are valued and seen as something that can bring benefit. So moving back to Dicina Bista, we would like to make the youth commemoration event more prominent in the UK, and a community online event was organised in England last year by myself, Rosa Sicilianeros, Terexia Rostis and Sherry, to raise more awareness about the Romani and Sinti Holocaust. that brought together a range of experts, community members and educators. Why I'm saying this is that there is much support from our communities and a willingness to work together, and many Romani and Traveller civil society organisations and existing task services working very hard to promote the richness of the culture and improve the life chances of young Roma and Travellers in Britain. The Council of Europe's recommendations present a very important opportunity to make a difference to the lives of young people every day and the quality of experience that they have whilst in school. We hope that the recommendations will be considered very carefully, and the direct link between educational attainment and a sense of belonging in a welcoming learning environment can go hand in hand with improving educational outcomes. And to end, I just wanted to bring it back to say that this needs to be viewed as not an issue of Gypsy and travel education, but an issue of inclusive education. And it needs to be viewed in this framework by policymakers as we move forward. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think we need to have a whole overhaul of our curriculum at the moment to reflect the diversity. Now I'm going to introduce you to Professor Rayna Schultz, who's also a Holocaust historian and has worked with the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. So good morning, Rayna.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. And thank you also for Lisa, who gave me the perfect entree to my talk. It is very clear that the Holocaust is central, a central remembrance for Gypsy, Roma and Travellers everywhere, not just on the continent. And indeed, remembering the Holocaust almost cries out for a proper and integral inclusion of the Roma experience. Holocaust is part of every child's formal education in England. It's part of the Key Stage 3 history curriculum. Most people in Britain have at least some knowledge of the Holocaust. And even though the knowledge is all too often very limited, most people would no doubt agree that those, and they would probably say it is basically Jews, targeted by the Nazis are innocent victims of persecution. And because of this limited view of who was targeted, it is so vital that the Roma experience becomes an integral part, not just an add-on or a token, in the way that we teach and remember the Holocaust or Nazi persecution more generally. In the late 1970s, German Sinti, through what later became the Central Council of German Sinti and Roma, led by Romani Holocaust, intensified their battle for public recognition of the Roma Holocaust. And their hope was that recognition as victims of Nazi persecution and a joint commemoration would help them battling anti-Roma racism in society at large. 40 or so years later, there has been some progress, of course, not only in Germany, but the progress that we have seen has been painfully slow and very patchy indeed. As Susanna said, I am mainly a Holocaust historian. And right, this is the wrong one. This is where we need to go. And I've always been, from the very first, been very disturbed by the expression other victims when looking at bookshelves at Holocaust museums and Holocaust exhibitions. And when I instituted Holocaust Memorial Week at the University of Essex in 2007, I tried to use this week of events to raise awareness of the many groups persecuted by the Nazis, persecuted in different ways, but with the same aim: to create a homogeneous society. And in 2010, I put the main focus on the persecution of the Roma and Sinti during the Nazi period and their continuing discrimination after 1945, because that is the other thing that we often forget when teaching the Holocaust. We need to start way before 1933, and we need to go way beyond 1945. And the 2010 Holocaust Memorial Week to my dismay, not necessarily my surprise, but to my dismay, showed that there was not much knowledge about the Roma experience during the Nazi period, even at a university level. In order to have some reference, we published the contributions, plus a few more that I got together in an edited volume. And whilst the situation has become slightly better now, at the time, Ian Hancock, a contributor to the volume and himself a Rom, of course, commented that this was the first mainstream publication about the Holocaust that he had come across, where in the table of contents, the experiences of the Roma featured before the experiences of the Jews. Of course, there are scholarly publications about the Holocaust, but there's still not enough information that is easily accessible for teachers, and not even for the GRT community. A few years later, when I introduced the Dora Love Prize for schools in Essex and Suffolk, it's an annual prize which asks students from years 7 to 10 to develop projects that link what they have learned about the Holocaust with the world they live in today. I made sure that we included the Roma experience from the very first year that we ran this prize. And again, a similar observation as during the 2010 Holocaust Memorial Week. After the introductory workshop on the Roma genocide, teachers approached me, some in tears, telling me that they had no idea that the Roma had been subjected to this kind of persecution. And as Susanna had pointed out earlier, this encouraged teachers to look more closely as how they teach the Holocaust and to include the Roma experience in their teaching. And we also had a couple of cases where pupils came out, if you so want, as Gypsy Roma Traveller, saying they had never spoken about their background and heritage openly because they feared prejudice. But after having gone through this workshop and the associated experiences, they felt it was the right time to do so. As a Holocaust historian, I have, of course, worked with most Holocaust organizations in the UK, even though my approach to the Holocaust has made me a bit of an outsider, especially some 10 or so years ago. Nonetheless, in 2015, approached by the UK Holocaust Memorial Day Trust to write a blog about the persecution of the Roma during the Nazi period to mark GRT History Month. Initially, the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust thought that it would be one blog, but it was blatantly obvious that you cannot deal with this topic adequately in just one blog. So in the end, I wrote 9 blogs, and I structured it in a way that a blog giving an overview, for example, of the so-called Gypsy family camp at Auschwitz, or the persecution of Roma in Eastern and Southeastern Europe, was followed by a blog about personal experiences, such as Ewald Hanstein or Hugo Höllenreiner, survivors of the Gypsy family camp, or Katika Djudjevic or Ramjadin Durmošević, Roma survivors of former Yugoslavia. But the point that I feel strongly about is to show that the Roma experience of persecution and extermination differed from that of the Jews. Yes, there was the so-called Gypsy family camp at Auschwitz, and the anniversary of the liquidation of this camp, the night of the 2nd to 3rd of August, is now the European Roma Holocaust Memorial Day. And the anniversary of the 16th of May 1944, when the Sinti and Roma in the Gypsy family camp successfully resisted their transportation to the gas chambers, is now marked as Romani Resistance Day. But despite of all of that, the experience of Auschwitz, the experience of extermination in Nazi or SS-run camps, was the experience of only a minority of Roma and Sinti. The genocide of the Roma during the Nazi period was characterized by sterilization, by mass shootings and arbitrary killings, rather than the industrialized extermination in the gas chambers of Auschwitz or other SS-run extermination camps in the East. And the majority of Roma were actually killed by their compatriots, by their neighbors, not by Germans or by German Nazis or the SS. My blogs were published on the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust's website in 2015. They are still available and are being used by teachers, as I was told by the Memorial Day Trust, which on the one hand is great, of course it is, but on the other hand, it shows that there are still not enough resources easily available for teachers who have not a GRT background. It is vital that mainstream organizations include information on Roma history, because it is only through mainstream organizations that this information trickles into mainstream consciousness and historical awareness and becomes available for teachers. The UK Holocaust Memorial Day Trust were open to this, but mind you, it was 70 years or more than 2 generations after the end of the Nazi regime that my blog was published. Other organizations have followed the example of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, although some quite a bit more hesitantly, shall I say, carefully. The Holocaust Educational Trust, for example, invited me several times to hold a workshop on the Nazi persecution of the Roma at their annual ambassadors conference, but the topic never made it beyond the workshops to the main stage of the ambassadors conference. And there were years when the Holocaust Educational Trust decided that the topic did not fit in with their general program. Hello? An ambassadors conference about the Holocaust and the Roma experience does not fit in? This is 70 or 75 years after the end of the Nazi regime. We must insist that the Roma experience always features as an integral part. It is not a dispensable add-on that you can include or exclude at your pleasure. For this, the GRT community needs to cooperate with organizations such as the UK Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, the Holocaust Educational Trusts, and others. But this cooperation cannot be on the basis of tokenism or on the basis of being included as other victims. The cooperation has to be one of equals. It has to be based on dignity and respect. And this requires some give and take on all sides. The GRT community needs allies to be successful in this endeavor, but it also needs some form of consensus about the mainstream principles it wants to pursue and achieve. I have long advocated that 75 years after the end of the Second World War, we need to reconceptualize the Holocaust without losing the sense of or denying or watering down the central role that the Holocaust holds for the European Jewry. It is about an integrative or inclusive narrative, an inclusive memory and inclusive commemoration, which does not speak about other victims, which is not based on a hierarchy of victims or a monopoly of suffering, as are so many existing narratives of the Holocaust. If we understand the Holocaust as a part of the Nazi vision of creating a homogeneous, pure, racially pure German society, then there is not only a place for the experiences of all groups declared as undesirable by the Nazis, but there is a necessity to include all groups who were victimized. Otherwise, we all lose out. It is to the benefit of all of us, not just the GRT community, because we as society benefit as a whole from an inclusive, integrative approach. Some might argue that the inclusion of the Roma in Holocaust memory just adds another element of memory which sees the Roma as nothing but victims. I would very much disagree. I would argue instead that it constitutes an important step towards inclusion into an overall narrative of who we, society at large, are, an integrative narrative of our common history, common present, and common future. Or to use the title of a wonderful school project for the Dora Love Prize a few years ago, we are all the same because we are all different. And the national curriculum needs to reflect this. And everyone gains from it. It's a win-win situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rayna. You made just so many, just such significant points there. And I think, yeah, it's government, education organisations, I mean, particularly those that are, you know, representing the Holocaust, need to sort of seize that responsibility and take the lead in this, and about working with the Gypsy Roma Traveller community. Anyway, we've got to crack on here, and our next guest is Terexia Rostis, who is a Roma educational consultant and advocate for the Roma community. So, Terexia, good morning.
Hi, everyone. Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Hello. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's great to listen to all the participants and my colleagues, and I'm just looking forward to share with you some of our projects that we do locally. So I'm Terexia Rostis. I wear different hats. I'm a secondary school teacher, but I'm also the founder of an organization called Care for Young People's Future, where we use alternative education and reintegration for our Roma young people. We tend to work with schools, with services, with the most vulnerable children who are at risk of permanent exclusion, or involved in with different teams such as youth offending. What I'm going to talk to you today about is I'm going to share with you some outcomes as part of the National Inclusion Week, which we've organized last year. And I just wanted to give you that positive vibe, and just to let you know that that change comes from us, and the impact that, you know, it can happen by having such events, it's immediate. So let me just share my screen for a minute. Okay. Can you see my screen? Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Okay. Right. So last year, back in October, we've organized the National Inclusion Week, where many of you have joined us. This was a free event. It didn't involve any single penny. It was absolutely organized for free, and everyone who joined this event was happy to join me without even mentioning any fees or any money. Now, the National Inclusion Week has been happening for a while now, and it's in its 8th year. I thought, well, hang on a minute, there's nothing going on about Roma inclusion, and it's the 8th year, so I just invited myself to organize something which would promote and strengthen the Roma inclusion in the UK. So we brought people and organizations together. We gave them, we tried to connect and inspire each other so that we promote the inclusion on an everyday reality. So Care for Young People's Future has planned a series of inclusive events for that week, and we've looked at aspects such as policies, the action plan, good practice, access to education. We've learned about actually the history of racism and ways of building a inclusive society. But we've also looked at how we can include the Roma history through different ways, such as arts, heritage, music, poetry, and modern elements of, from our society. So this is how the event was structured, and the people that joined us were really, some of them were from the Roma communities, and it was a good mix, actually, Roma and non-Roma, from the grassroots, but also experts in the Roma inclusion and policies. So we wanted actually to start by learning about the fundamental rights and aspects of Roma inclusion by tackling inequalities. So what we've done, so on the first day we've had Migration Yorkshire, who did a lot of work in South Yorkshire for the Roma community, started with doing a bit of research, mapping doing some local mapping where we've looked at the numbers of the Roma and the needs and challenges for the Roma community and the services. We've had Lindsay, who is our trustee, and she told us about how the Roma are in a position of not negotiating their European citizenship. And then we've had Dan Pavel Dogi from the chief of the OSCE contact point for Roma and Sinti issues. Why I'm mentioning this is because UK is part of this of OSCE and there's about 47 countries who all agreed to follow the recommendations in order in the aspect of the Roma and Sinti issues. And then we've had Pauline as well, the Director of Learning, Inclusion and Skills City from Derby. And we've all shared the same feelings about the fact that in the UK, there isn't a national guidance for the Roma inclusion. Some local authorities were struggling to, every single time where we were working with them, they were just saying that we feel that there is this lack of national guidance for the Roma inclusion. So we feel that we might benefit by having this guidance. But at the same time, Eva and Lindsay were saying, and Dan was emphasizing the fact that there are no consequences if this guidance is not implemented as is being actually asked. We've also had Baroness Whitaker giving us a bit of update regarding the Women's Equality Report, in which we've wanted to see whether the Department of Education and the Parliament has made any progress. As we know in the report, it says that Roma in the UK has still have the lowest outcome in all aspects, such as housing, education, health, and employment. So we've looked at the policies, but then at the second day, we wanted to learn a bit more about how we can create a culture of inclusion and how unconscious bias are presented without our awareness and how exist. And we've had Jitan Patel telling us about how actually unconscious bias come from different microaggressions. And Angelique Richardson from Exeter University explained to us about the history and citizenship and how the inequality is actually still presented and existing in our days, and that actually we shouldn't negotiate the right to the citizenship. We've also had Romani PhD students presenting their work, and that was great to see that we can bring together, professors and Romani students on the same topic. Peter Anwin launched his project called Roma Missing Voices, where I was part of, and it's about Roma with disabilities in the UK. And I don't think so far we've covered this topic, but we've wanted to actually share the positive aspects of the Roma people with disabilities, how independent they are and how actually good role models they are, but the fact that there is a need to provide a bit more to the Roma people in the UK with disabilities. Krina also taught us about how we can become a human rights educator. And then on the second day, we've looked at influencing the access to higher education. Now, Kai Sidebottom from Leeds Beckett University told us about what does innovation and social skills means, and the course that they've created, how practical it is and has been adapted to communities like Roma. At the moment, they've got 3 Roma students, and it's the first year when they started this course. But Kai was emphasizing the importance of understanding what inclusion is doing rather than what it is. Lisa talked to us about the book which she wrote in partnership with a school from Bradford, Chasing the Volcano, which is a book about fighting against climate change, and it was written with Roma and Arabic pupils, and the characters in the book are Roma and different ethnicities. So that was another example of how we can promote the inclusion of the Roma in the education system. Margaret as well, Professor Margaret Greenfield, presented the pledge where universities were invited to be part of this UK pledge, where actually we support and empower more the Roma young people to access higher education and universities. Marco as well joined us with the same report, and Ramiza Sakib, she's an educational advisor in Macedonia, emphasized the aspect of having Roma involved in political at the political level. So in her city, she gave us an example that actually the MEP is from her city, the mayor is Roma. There were so many doctors from her city that were Roma, so at a really high level. So she said, until we don't start and get involved the Roma community in different aspects, but not just in education, health and housing, but also at a political level, the change will be difficult. And then we've had Roma inclusion through art, heritage, music, and poetry. Now, what this is one of my favorite, because as a teacher, what I've done, I went back to Romania and I got all the Romani books that they are available, which contain Roma history, Romani language, Roma heritage, and I'm using them as part of the trainings, as part of the workshops, as part of the language. I'm using them for the children, but also for staff or for different services which want to learn or need to learn about Roma culture, heritage, and language. On this day, when we've done the heritage, art, and music and poetry, we've had amazing artists which are doing modern art, not just the traditional element that we all know about the Roma community. Rosa as well launched some podcasts. Rain recited some of her poetry, of her poems, and we've had a different aspect of presenting the women's, because it was about women empowerment, women from different cultures through makeup, but also through traditional heritage. And then on the last day, we've had connecting the dots for the youth. We've looked at how actually we can empower our youth, our young people, to achieve their best in life, which are the aims of Care for Young People's Future. So at Care for Young People's Future, this is what we want to do. We want to empower the Roma young people to achieve their best in life, but we also want to find a balance with the services so that actually we connect them and we raise their aspiration. This week was just an idea which we've actually put it in action, and the impact that it had, it actually had an immediate impact. Some of the universities wrote to me and they said, "This is brilliant. I'm gonna have some seminars about the inclusion of Roma. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna teach a bit more about the Roma history. I'm gonna do some research about eugenics and the history of racism. Oh, it's brilliant that we can do this." And then some other students have written some of their essays based on this week. So I think events like this are a brilliant opportunity to come together, learn about the Roma community, Roma history, empower each other, but also influence policies and support the social change. Also, resources have been shared, and I'm happy to share. I just wanted to show you some examples of some people that attended this event. Now, this is Ionela. She's an arts teacher, and the way that she's talking about the Roma history is through sculpture and art. And this is one of her pieces that is starting with. This is how she's expressing some of her work. This is called Maternity. This is Angel Wings, and is currently exposed at Paradise Lost and at Biennale della Venezia, so in Italy. And again, it's the way that she sees this freedom and sacrifice, you know, for that each of us needs to do. This is actually the weight and what it reflects and what it means. As you can see, it's one of the work that actually she thinks it's part of the everyday life. The next one, this is related to Holocaust, and it's the way that she actually interpreted using barbed wire. This is called Sleep, and it's the history of the Holocaust forgotten by many of us, but we carried, and it appears in our subconscious because it is in our DNA. The way that she's describing it and the way that she said that it is the sacrifice, the cry of suffering of our ancestors, I just think it's amazing work, and we should show this to our children. And this is the silence after, and the way that she's describing it is she's saying is the slap that the society we live in gives us woman, and it's that invisible force that makes you to shut up and feel like you're drowning. This is another young Roma boy that I wanted to show you quickly a couple of photos with him. And this is Denis Nanciu. He's a Roma student in Bucharest. And the way that he's describing his art, I'm just going to show you some of his work. The Wiser. I think it's a unique Roma student that it's expressing his feelings through art, but the way that he's doing and this the way that he's, you know, even this one, Child Dreaming, I just think it's amazing the way that he's been able to portray it. And this one, look how many elements it's got, how many historical elements has this image, this painting got. Papusha, we're learning about the Roma poet, yeah. We're learning about our history, we're learning about Holocaust, we're learning about so many other things through art. Discrimination. Now this picture, it contains so much information and the message, you know. You've got, it refers to how Black people were treated during slavery and to the Roma, to what they were called today, slaves, beggars, or crows. And the connection that he made is with the water, yeah? And he put there upper pentarome, which means water for Roma, because he made a connection with the fact that some doctors, and it's still happening in Europe and in other countries, doctors refuse to treat Roma. Yeah, and there's many others. There's many other examples, which I'm happy to share, and most of my guests have been happy for me to share their work with you. But yeah, I think what I wanted to share with you is that I'm a dreamer, and I will do as much as I can to empower our young people to follow their dream, whether it's through you know, through non-formal education, whether it's to mainstream education. We all have to support them to know a bit more about their own history, but to empower them to become and achieve their best in life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terexia. I'm sorry to have had to draw you to a close there. That was great. I'm now going to introduce you to Chelsea, who is the Education and Policy Campaigns Officer at the Traveller Movement. So good morning, Chelsea.
Well, morning all. Just a little caveat, if you do hear any kids in the background, my apologies. They have a tendency to disrupt my meetings. I have given warnings this morning, but yeah, in case there's any noise. I think for me, there's been lots of like really great speakers this morning, and I guess I don't want to kind of go over a lot of that too much. But I think for me, one really important point is this is not a new conversation. There are people much older than me who've been having this conversation for a long time. This isn't something the DFE don't know about. You know, we're not introducing something completely new. We're not having a new topic of conversation. They know this. You know, my nan did a video with them in 1998 and it was titled, "Are We Missing Out?" Why are we having the same conversation this many years on? Like, it's a little bit tiring. And, you know, I think really it should come from the top down, but I fear that it won't, especially with this government. And I think actually we probably have a lot of teachers, a lot of people who work in education on this call. And I would say if it's not going to come from the top down, then those who work in education need to make it their personal mission to ensure that it's included. A lot of Ollie's points really resonated. And you know, I've gone to school in London. It's much better than other places. London's more diverse, and I think that helps. But I went to a school where they actively tried to include it. They made the effort. And I think what we have to ensure is that we don't make it tokenistic, and we reflect actually the real kind of multitude of experiences. And, you know, sometimes people talk to me about horses and I just want to be like, listen, I live in Peckham. I live in South London. I don't know anything. I'm not interested. I have a phobia of animal hair. Don't care. And I think sometimes we can kind of fall into that little trap of just going, actually, this is what it looks like. But what we need to see is kind of the full breadth and diversity of histories and culture and everything that comes in between. And ensure that we don't just talk about it in a history lesson and relegate it to this one event, but actually, is it reflected in the literature that we're reading? You know, is it just part of everyday topics of conversation? You know, in a way that you don't notice it. It's not that big of a deal. And you know, when I was in secondary, my school did put stuff up for Gypsy, Roma and Traveller History Month. At times I didn't always appreciate it because I'm like, oh my God, why is my cousins and brothers on the wall? Like, where'd you get this picture from? But kind of now as an adult, I do get what they were doing. That wasn't the first time my peers, it's, you know, it meant that it wasn't new. So I think it's looking at what are the resources we already have out there. We have so much stuff. We don't necessarily need to create lots of new stuff, although that would also be great. But like, where's the good practice? Where's the work that's already being done that schools can just start doing that immediately? It doesn't have to be massive changes. And yeah, and I just think this is not new, and I really hope we're not having this conversation in 20 years. I'm not going to be sitting at the table to have a conversation. I'm not doing it. And I hope it isn't other people still having the same conversation. We have the resources, we know the information, and a lot of people here have been doing great work for so long. It's time that schools and teachers just started implementing it. If it isn't going to come from the DFE, then it has to come from the bottom up and do it that way. I sometimes feel like I've lost a little bit of hope in that kind of top-down approach. And yeah, I don't know, maybe in 10 years it might be a slightly different conversation. And I think it's, you know, in schools, if you have it coming from the top, then it's much better. If you have good senior leaders, then, you know, the vast majority of the travel girls that went to the school I went to stayed. Unless you moved on because you were traveling, everybody stayed and got to year 11 and finished, even if you didn't go and do anything after. And that was one head teacher achieving that. It is possible across the board, but work has to be done with at university level with teacher training, because it's an optional add-on. You know, I've been having conversations with trainee teachers, and you're getting asked that really, there's just such a low level of knowledge. It's really, really basic. I had what I would describe a very arsey trainee teacher last week who kept coming back to the fact that how can you be a traveller if you don't travel? Even though I'm going, listen, that's a state imposed term, this is where it's come from. And I think, oh Jesus, you're going to be that teacher. And most travellers will recognise having that teacher where you think you are just a not nice person and you're going to be a problem. But that has to be kind of seen, it has to be embedded within the training. and not an optional add-on that people who feel like they care doing it. And that's the problem we have, you know, out of a cohort of 150, 30 will care about social justice. And this is reflective for other groups across the board as well. I'm not going to go on because I do have to pop off, but yeah, look, we know what it is. I think it's a matter of doing it. You know, do something, anything.
Thank you, Chelsea. I totally feel those frustrations, and you know, obviously we've had so many perspectives today, and on this whole subject. But you know, this is the bottom line, isn't it? You know, we need to act now. So this leads me now to Clyde Fisher, Department of Education. Yes. Over to you to sort of outline your position on what's been spoken about today. That's a big
Thank you,
ask.
Susanna. I don't know whether you can all hear me. Hopefully you can.
Yes.
I've attempted to unmute myself. Great. Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry I joined late. I got here about 11:30 because I've been in various other meetings, but been fascinating listening to who has been talking since then. And just thank you very much for inviting a member of the department to come and speak at this event. Obviously, I want to make it clear that this is very much so. I'm just a voice for the department. This is the department's position. I'm Clyde Fisher, and I am a policy advisor working on, among other things, history policy. I'll give an overview of the department's position on the teaching of Gypsy, Roma and Traveller history as part of the history national curriculum. So the department believes strongly that there's no place for racism in our society or in our education system. The Department for Education is committed to an inclusive education system which recognises and embraces diversity and supports all pupils and students to tackle racism and have the knowledge and tools to do so. We believe the history of Britain is a history of diverse groups who have worked to build the country we have, and it's important to include those facts as an integral part of teaching the national curriculum. It may help at this point to clarify that the national curriculum is a framework setting out the content of what the department expects schools to cover in each subject. The curriculum does not set out how curriculum subjects or topics within the subjects should be taught. The department believes teachers should be able to use their own knowledge and expertise to determine how they teach their pupils and how to make choices about what they teach. Although the national curriculum is not required to be taught in academies and free schools, they are required to deliver a broad and balanced curriculum as exemplified by the national curriculum. Ofsted's new inspection framework also places a renewed focus on all schools, ensuring all pupils receive a broad, balanced and ambitious curriculum. As part of a broad and balanced curriculum, pupils should be taught about different societies and how different groups have contributed to the development of Britain. And this can include the voices of people belonging to Gypsy, Roma and Traveller communities. The flexibility within the history curriculum means that there is opportunity for teachers to teach about Gypsy, Roma and Traveller history across the spectrum of themes and eras set out in the curriculum. Schools can access a number of resources to help them with this. For example, the Historical Association produced curriculum resources for schools to enable children to learn about Gypsy Romani culture as part of the more general work on British society. These resources can be found on the Historical Association's website. Moving on to Holocaust education, the department is fully committed to Holocaust education. The curriculum gives teachers and schools the freedom to decide how to teach the subject and what resources to use to support them, to support an understanding of the Holocaust and the experiences of the non-Jewish victims of Nazi persecution. The department further supports pupil and teachers' understanding of the Holocaust by providing funding for the Holocaust Educational Trust's Lessons from Auschwitz project, over 2 million in 2019 to 20, and to the UCL Institute of Education Centre for Holocaust Education, 500,000 in 2019 to 20, match funded by the Pears Foundation, who also provided 1.7 for a one-year programme in 2019 to 20 to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Bergen-Belsen by British troops. The programme included a resource pack sent to all secondary schools. As part of Holocaust education, a wide array of resources are available to help teachers explain the persecution by the Nazis of different groups of people. Both lessons from Auschwitz and the knowledge and training provided by the Centre for Holocaust Education include information and resources to support an understanding of the Holocaust and the Nazis' persecution of other non-Jewish groups, importantly including the genocide of the Roma. Last year, the Council of Europe's Committee of Ministers adopted a recommendation that called on its 47 member states, including the United Kingdom, to include the history of Roma and/or travellers in school curricula and teaching materials. As outlined earlier, the department's position on this is that Roma and travellers' history can already be taught as part of schools offering a broad and balanced curriculum, and that resources are already available to teach this, including those, but certainly not limited to, those that I referenced earlier. And that's where I'll finish. I'd just like to thank you all again for giving me the opportunity to outline the department's position and for, like I say, the interesting talks that I've managed to see since 11:30 since joining.
Okay, thank you, Clive.
Sorry,
thank
Susanna.
No, sorry. No, for outlining your position. I appreciate that you're not that you're speaking on behalf of.
Yes, I can't speak personally here, but I have to speak.
And not from, yeah. I mean, and obviously, when you put it like that, you think, oh yeah, great, but we're kind of seeing from our experience that this still isn't working, and it's, yes, those resources are available, but it's sort of it's improving access to those resources and also giving for the it's putting the onus obviously onto the education system and local authorities to sort of rectify this. So there needs to be a will there, really, to sort of change this. And I mean, we are always being, we're constantly being contacted by teachers asking us for resources and how do they access resources, and because it's kind of it is still, it's a minefield, and as Chelsea said, we don't necessarily need more resources, but I think or there needs to be some kind of mandate into teacher training that this is something that needs to be included. Yeah, so that brings us to the end, and I'm just kind of overwhelmed, to be honest, by all the different perspectives, and it's just been an absolutely brilliant event, and I hope I hope everybody that's been watching today has got a lot out of it, and hopefully conversations can continue after this event. And I'm just going to hand you over to Emma, who's going to close the event. But just before, apologies for the technical hiccups that I experienced. So I will share my PowerPoint at the end, or enable you to access it. Also to say that the play Crystals Vardo I didn't mention, but obviously we've had to halt the work that we're doing because of the pandemic. But we are developing an online version of the play, which is specifically for schools, and resources connected to that, and that will be launched for Gypsy Roma Traveller History Month. So yes, watch this space about that. But is there anything else that you'd like to say, Emma, before we close?
A couple more questions come up on the chat about the syllabus. Let me just find them. Sorry, I've had some technical problems with the chat today. I wasn't sending the answers to everyone. I was sending them just to the panelists. So that's why some of my answers have come in not really at the same time as the panelists. So the first one says, from Phil Martin, don't underestimate the impact of particular modules. I did the American West for GCSE history, and the experience of Native Americans, including their genocide, remains with me to this day. But do any exam boards have full modules on Gypsy Roma history, which schools could select as opposed to particular resources? And then there's another question following that. How does the DofE help to shape the syllabus that exam boards are choosing to focus pupils on? Don't know if you're able to answer those questions, Clyde.
Hi, sorry, we'll probably have to come back to you on those because that's a bit wider than my area, because I just speak on the history policy, like I've said. But we can certainly put a response together for you about that, and I'll send it to Lucy or whoever would be the best person to send it to.
Right, okay, yeah, so just to echo Susanna's, thank you, Clyde, just to echo Susanna's words, it's been an absolutely fabulous morning. The speakers have been really thought-provoking and interesting. So thank you so much. It is disappointing that we don't have a commitment from the Department of Education and government that the Council of Europe commitment will be mandatory. It is really disappointing. But I think all we can do then is to try and persuade hearts and minds of the real importance that Gypsy and Traveller history is and culture is on the curriculum. The fact that we've had 350 attendees register today shows an appetite for it, I think. And we have to, so just finding something I wrote down, which I've now lost. Yeah, we have to really remember Rayna's point that it's not a dispensable add-on, the Roma experience of the Holocaust. It must really be that firmly there on the curriculum. We've got a new resources website on a section on our website of curriculum resources. So it's a work in progress. If anyone has any resources they'd like to include on that, please do send them to us. And we have Gypsy, for those that don't know, there is Gypsy, Roma and Traveller History Month in June, which is a good opportunity for schools to celebrate Gypsy and Traveller history and culture. And the Council of Europe recommendation that came out in July last year, on which this event was based, that the recommendation being that schools have Gypsy and Traveller history in the curriculum. The recommendation included a recommendation to monitor progress every 5 years. So perhaps we should, if the government are not going to implement and monitor, perhaps we could, as NGOs working in this field, try and monitor and keep tabs on progress, and hope that schools will voluntarily and willingly build this into their curriculum. Thank you very much, everyone.
And I think making links with local authorities as well, local education authorities, then, because that's, I suppose, if we can at least start there, and then it can trickle down through schools. And I think, yeah, the Holocaust is that's an integral part, isn't it? And as I think both myself and Rayna pointed out, you know, it is actually the only compulsory subject within Key Stage 3 history, the Holocaust. So, you know, why there's that opportunity there. So, you know, that's a starting point, really.
Yeah. And also, if we've got time, or if people like to stay to watch, there's a short 5-minute film that's been made very recently by Jackie Whitford at East Sussex Traveller Education Service on the Roma Holocaust. It's only 5 minutes. It's very good. So we're going to, technology allowing, attempt to show that now. So unless there's any final questions or points from the panel that anyone wants to mention. Oh, Susanna's got something. And
just one thing, because some of you may not want to stay for the extra 5 minutes to watch the film, although I really do recommend that you do stay. There is a Survey Monkey that we'd really like you to fill in. So that's an opportunity to share what you felt about today, and also if you want to to give us your contact details or anything that you missed. So please do just take 5 minutes to complete, because we really want to sort of evaluate this today. Rayna.
Yes, no, I'm muted. I just wanted to make 2 points that we need to discuss, which have always been problems. It's the terminology. You know that using the term Roma Holocaust is very controversial for, I would consider, all the wrong reasons, but we need to be prepared for that. And the other really touchy topic are numbers. How many Gypsy and Roma or Roma and Sinti perished in the Holocaust? Again, a highly controversial issue. the figure of half a million that we generally use was taken or was established by Romani Rosa in the late 1970s, when there was no real research, and all the current evidence that we have is that it is a minimum of 200,000, 220, 230,000. Most likely there is more, but I think we need to be really careful that we use evidenced information, because otherwise the doubters and deniers will come and say, oh, this little detail is wrong, so everything is wrong. So I think we need to be prepared for a battle of the term Holocaust, which I would strongly advocate as an umbrella term, because the Jewish don't even use that term very often. They have Shoah, so there's nothing taking away from anyone. And we need to be specific on the details and the facts that we use, that it's really evidenced.
Thank you, Rayna. No. I mean, I always say in excess of 500,000, but that's. Are there any other points that any of the other members of the panel would like to raise before we close today?
Just a question for Terexia. I think there are some questions in the chat asking whether National Roma Inclusion Week would be an annual event.
Yes, it will be, and hopefully we can all you can all join us and do more events at local level, depending with what will happen this year with the pandemic. But yeah, it would be brilliant to see that it's happening in different places at local level. If not, we'll just do it online. So yeah, just stay in touch, and Lucy or Susanna will just, maybe we can just have a network.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
I think I've got the film ready to go now, so I'll get that playing.
So I'm lighting this candle to remember all of the people who died during the Holocaust, and especially the people in my community, the Gypsy and travelling community. Historians estimate between 500,000 to 1.5 million Gypsies perished under the Nazi regime. So my name's Lewis Smith. I come from a family of one side of it in the Gorgie community and one side of it in the Gypsy travelling community. I go to university in ACM, which is an Academy of Contemporary Music in Guildford. I study music business. There's a massive amount of prejudice towards the Gypsy community. You see it in all walks of life. It's probably the most separated from every other community. During school, we were taught about the Holocaust. I can only really remember the perishing of the Jewish community. And actually a high percentage, I mean 80 to 90% of Gypsies who lived in these Nazi countries perished under the Nazi regime. Gypsies are believed to originate from Asia, around the regions of North India. The reason for leaving the East and travelling through the eastern regions of Europe have remained unknown. Many historians believe it could be due to famine or persecution.
The history of Gypsy, Roma, Traveller people, it's a history of discrimination, of disadvantage, of persecution, of outlawing, and of expulsions.
These traveller groups were skilled and worked flexibly within the work and metal industries. They were also skilled horse trainers, entertainers and musicians, which are still very popular choices even today. In the first part of the 20th century, there were many anti-Gypsy laws already in place throughout Europe. Romani people had to register with the police and were restricted from entering public places, being viewed as criminals.
We have to look back to the past, and we have to acknowledge what's happened in the past.
Gypsies were one of the communities targeted under Hitler's regime due to the fact they were not ethnically German. Having one Gypsy great-grandparent was enough to have a family sent to a concentration camp.
Gypsies and travellers suffered the same persecution in Nazi Germany as the Jews did.
My grandmother was a Holocaust survivor. My half-uncle was killed in the Holocaust. First of all, they took him and did experiments on him, and then they gassed him with 10,000 other kids. My grandmother was saved, but that was because somebody helped her, and my mum and my two aunties were saved. How does it make me feel? I'm scared. I wouldn't want it to happen again. I'm glad I'm in Australia. I wouldn't want to live in Germany, and I wouldn't want to live in Europe because of it, in case it does happen again.
I think anti-Gypsyism still remains a massive issue within Europe and Britain. Still, even today in the local communities, there are still massive amount of prejudice, and even running throughout schools, there still seems to be that barrier of, okay, well, you know, we're not too happy with you living here.
It's not that they have decided to withdraw from society and live on the margins. They've been excluded. They are the victims, the historic victims of social exclusion. We have to accept responsibility for what has happened to these communities.
For my hopes for the future, for my family, and I think for every Gypsy, is to finally be accepted by everyone for who we are. Yes, we're a little bit different, but we're still human beings, and we all have feelings. I think education is a vital part for young people. Education gives you the ability to learn about other cultures and understand other communities. It's about actually learning to mix within different cultures.
Susanna, Emma, I'm not sure if you want to say anything before we finish up.
No, sorry. Just really thank you to everyone, and thank you to Jackie Whitford and Brighton Traveller Education for that film and enabling us to share it today, because I think that was a really kind of poignant end to the event. So really just to thank everybody for attending today, and also to thank all the participants, all the panelists. It's just been absolutely fantastic.